In today's video, we're going to be painting up a goblin from the Deepcut wizkids line. Okay, so what we're going to be doing here first is we're going to come in and we're going to start off with a goblin green, which I thought was pretty fitting for painting up a goblin. So, just grabbing that goblin green, what we're going to do is we're going to be painting all the skin of our goblin. This goblin's got ears nicely sticking out from this little leather cap he's got on, so being pretty good with that. And over the face, as well as he has his feet uncovered as well. He has just some little bits of armor plating on his feet, but we're just going to be painting up just the feet, as well as just the ends of his hands. He has little leather gauntlets on, so we want to get those in there as well. Okay, so once we have all the goblin skin painted up, we're going to come in now with oak brown, and we're going to use the oak brown to paint the little leather hat that our goblin has on. I'm painting this just in a sort of a really rough, dark leather style, but you may want to paint it a bright colour, but I'm going to be making this goblin sort of like he's made most of this stuff himself from animals he's caught in his life, rather than him coming across bits of cloth. So, okay, so once we have that done, we're going to move on now with necromancer cloak, and we're going to use the necromancer cloak to paint up our goblin's pants that he has on. So if finding it a bit difficult here because it's quite a small miniature, you might want to come in with a smaller detail brush, but I'm just got my brush to a nice point so I could really get in to all the little areas that his pants are. As well as, I'd just like to mention too, I don't know if I mentioned it in the painting with the cap, I also just painted up the handle of the little spear the goblin has with that oak brown as well. Okay, so once we've finished painting up his pants, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with a leather brown. And we're going to be using this leather brown to paint up our goblin's leather chest armor he has on. So just getting in there with the brush, just trying to avoid as much as we can of those other pieces that we have on here, like the straps, as well as like his fur cloak and that. We're just trying to avoid those as much as you can. Okay, so once we have that leather chest armor complete, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with a monster brown, and we're going to use this monster brown to paint up our other leather areas that our goblin has on him. So we're going to be painting up our scabbard here for our sword. We're going to be painting up his leather arm braces, as well as he has a couple of leather I'd call them straps or just platings that he has on his feet as well. So we want to paint all that stuff in the monster brown. We want to do this so we're just separating it out a little bit from the leather brown that we have on our goblin's chest. So just varying it up with a couple of different browns to make it look a little bit different on the table as well once we do that. So just to make it stand out that little bit more. But if you want to stick with the leather brown for the whole lot, go ahead. So now we'll be moving on with fur brown, and we're going to be using the fur brown to paint the cloak of our goblin. And we're just going to be painting just the inside of this cloak, because we're going to be using a different colour to paint the outside of it. So just coming in here now with this fur brown, which is a sort of very orangey brown, maybe even a little bit of a reddy brown. So we just want to use that to mix up all our colours in here as well. So we're not using all the same browns. That's why I used so many different types of browns to make it look like it's scraps from all different things that the goblin has killed. So now we're going to be moving on with some uniform grey, and we're going to be using this uniform grey to paint up the spear that the goblin has, because I want it to make it look like he's crafted this out of a stone he's found on the ground. So I'm not going with any sort of metal or anything on there, so I want this to be a real primitive looking stone weapon, so that's why we're going with the uniform grey. Then once we've completed that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to come back with our oak brown now, and we're going to be using our oak brown to be painting the leather strap our goblin has on here. So I've just waited for all these other parts to dry while I've decided to put this on here. You can put it on just after you've done the other bits of leather if you want, but I wanted to make sure that they were really dry first before I come down with another layer of brown, because otherwise I have a big tendency to accidentally overspill and then all the brown colours will mix into one, so that's why I wait for each part to individually dry before putting on the next. Then once we have that completed, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be moving on with a desert yellow, and we're going to be using the desert yellow to be painting the really fluffy fur trimming around our goblin's cape. So just coming in here now and just basically dabbing it on rather than brushing it on, since the area is reasonably small, and this is going to give us a good colour difference between our furs on our cloak. So just coming in here, as well as we're going to be painting all the other bit that is around our goblin's neck as well. We're all going to be painting that in the desert yellow too, to really give off a really light fur creature that this goblin has slain feel with the fur lining, as well as to separate it out from all the other browns. We've gone with more of a yellow. It still has a little bit of brown in it, I think, but it's going to stand out amongst all those browns that we've already placed on our goblin. Now we have all the goblin's fur and leather painted up. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on with dragon red. I'm going to use the dragon red to paint the bit of cloth he has in the front of him here, his loincloth, I guess you would call it, and I want it to be a nice bright colour to stand out amongst all this brown and green we have on here. So just something to offset all the contrast of all of this, as well as he could have picked it up from some enemy he's slain or something like that. But I'm mainly just using this colour to stand out amongst all the colours we already have here, so you really focus in on it when you see the table, and it really sticks out amongst the whole thing. So now we have that red cloth painted up. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on with a matte white, and I'm going to be using the matte white to paint up the goblin's eyes and teeth. Now you may want to go with something different here. You may want to go with yellow teeth or red eyes or something like that. I'm just going to keep it reasonably simple and come in with these bright white colours. Now I'm placing these on pretty rough, because my technique is I put on a bunch of the colour that we're using for our eyes or mouth with the small detail. So I place all that on first, reasonably large, and then what I do is I wait for it to dry 100% completely, and then I'll reapply that skin colour that we have on. So for a case of our goblin here, I'll reapply our goblin green once after it's dry, and then just come in slowly with a fine detail brush and get as close to the edge of those details as I can to really make it look like it's the original sculpt part on there. It's the easiest way I find to paint eyes and mouths and stuff like that. So now you can see that we have that all done, and you can see I've come back in here with that green. We're now going to be moving on with plate mail metal, and we're going to be using the plate mail metal to paint up all our metal that our goblin has on here. So this of course is the big nasty sword that we've got here for our goblin, as well as he has his belt buckle, and he has just a little sort of like a clip or maybe even a little necklace thing he has on his chest as well, holding his fur cloak together. So we want to make sure we get that as well. So just being careful as we can now, so we don't have to paint over everything that we have. And you see here he's got just like a little moon shape, and I want that to be sort of a metal clip that he's found on here as well, and just being really careful as well with our belt buckle. So take your time if you need to, go over it a couple times as well, just to make sure you've really got that metal colour on there. And then once we have all the metal painted up, what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our uniform grey now, and I'm going to use this to just paint up the base that the goblin's on. So just like he's on a little rocky stony surface, just simple like that. So that's a nice easy thing to do. Just make sure you cover the whole lot, and as well try and avoid painting on the feet as much as you can. So if you have to, come in with a smaller brush to get around his little feet. Okay, so once we have that done, that is it for all our base layers. So now what we want to do is we want to move on with some nuln oil. And now we're just going to be using this nuln oil to place a wash over all our middle areas. So that's our sword, and then the two clips that he has on, so the little belt buckle, as well as his clip that's holding on his cloak. So we want to make sure we give a nice good coverage to all of them. And also, good tip that you can, if you have too much wash on here, sort of like I do a little bit on my sword, what you can do is you can just come back in with the tip of the brush, and it'll just soak up just a little bit of that excess that you have on there, so make sure you do that as well. So once our nuln oil is all dried, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with agrax eartshade, and then we're going to be using the agrax eartshade to cover the entirety of the rest of the miniatures, while just being careful to avoid the eyes on our goblin, because I want to keep those nice and bright. This is totally up to you. You may want to have them a little bit darker, but for me I want to keep the eyes nice and bright, but I will be going over the teeth as well. I want them to have sort of dirty, nasty teeth, so coming in with that agrax eartshade, it's going to be nice to dirty up those teeth as well. So just making sure we're covering all of them, as well as trying to avoid as much as we can the area that we've already just placed the nuln oil on as well. That's why I also want to try and wait for the nuln oil to dry up as much as possible before placing on this layer. And also don't forget to place our agrax eartshade on the ground base that he's on as well, as you can see there, as well as the underside of the cape and the back of the miniature as well. You want to get all that in there as well, because it's going to be really good for having a lot of shadow in there, because it's going to pull quite a bit in some of those areas. And don't forget too, if you also feel like it's pulling too much, just come in with nothing on your brush, and then you can just use it to just dab on those areas where it's pulling, and it'll soak up a lot of that wash on there as well. So now once we have that done, I'm gonna come in here now with one extra little effect, which is dry rust. It's this cool little effect that what you do is you just dry brush it on to any middle area, and it comes out with nice sort of orangey flakes that look a lot like rust. So I want the goblin to have old rusty weapon, so I want to make sure that I get just a little bit of the rust on there, so it looks like he's sort of found this somewhere after a long time of use. And there you have it. With all that done, we are now completed with our Pathfinder Goblin from the Deep Cuts range from WizKids. And you can see that it come out really nice, and just adding things like those little rusty effect on his sword, to varying up all the colours of brown we have for all his leather armour, can add just a lot of little detail that you don't think would otherwise, from just painting all of our stuff the same color that we would have done with the brown. So just doing little things like that can really add just a lot of difference when you're having a little bit of a closer look on the miniature. But with that, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope this has been useful for you in case you want to paint up your own goblin. But with that, I'll have to leave you there, and I hope to see you all in the next video.